New evidence for the Shroud of Turin validates its authenticity. Now, longtime skeptics have always said this.
Apart from the fact that this conflicts with the consensus among scientists that the Shroud is a mid-14th century forgery.
Okay, so that's Dan McClellan. By the way, I just like it to be known in the record to show that Dan does have 66,600 subscribers. But as we've been looking into more of this story recently, like within the last day or so, information came out suggesting that this new form of dating perhaps validates that the Shroud of Turin actually goes back to 2,000 years, right around the time that Jesus was crucified. Let's check this out.
Conclusions from a recent scientific study are shocking even the most ardent skeptics. Scientists from the Institute of Crystallography of the National Research Council applied what's called a wide-angle X-ray technique to study 8 small samples of fabric from the Shroud. The technique enables researchers to actually examine the garment at a microscopic level, enabling them to determine the time the Shroud was actually manufactured. The results of the X-ray examination were astounding. Scientists have confirmed that the Shroud was indeed manufactured approximately 2,000 years ago, during the same time period Christ lived.
Okay, so what they've said historically is this is a medieval forgery. Okay, Dan in his previous video said that the new information that came out had people guessing back in, I want to say 2017 and 2022 on an experimental way of dating this. As of August 2024, which is yet another new study, we're seeing information coming out that perhaps based on this, it is actually real.
Well, there's a bit more in here, which is super interesting about the blood, the type of blood that was found on the Shroud of Turin.
Now, this study, of course, contradicts the rather infamous 1988 study that used carbon dating to locate the origin of the Shroud to the medieval period, over 1,000 years after the time of Christ. And that, in many respects, closed the case for many skeptics with regard to the authenticity of the Shroud. But few realize that that carbon dating was in many respects disproved by a Russian scientist a few years later. We have to remember that the Shroud has survived a couple of fires, which is itself miraculous. And this Russian scientist theorized that the intense heat caused isotopic discharges from the silver, wood, and other materials in the Shroud's container so as to affect the molecules of the Shroud. And so it wasn't the cloth that dated back to the medieval period, but rather the container in which the cloth was stored.
Whoa. Okay, now, by the way, this is Dr. Steve Turley, who did a great video on this just a day ago. Shout out to him. So they're saying that
the original thing was not accurate at all.
Not accurate at all. You know what I was thinking about? I was thinking about what if the piece that they tested was actually a piece of it got damaged, and so someone added
something
sewn back on. But if it's really a relic going back to the days of Jesus, would they even tinker with that? Would they even meddle with that? You know, so it's an interesting thing that maybe perhaps it was misdated because they just happened to test the wrong one. But he's saying it's not even that. He's saying that it's actually where it was stored that set off the wrong potential dates.
Yeah.
Because he
goes into the blood right
such a period. And so a number of dating tests since 1988 have concluded that the Shroud originated approximately right around the time of Christ in the 1st century AD. And this latest study, looking at the Shroud at the microscopic level, appears to have conclusively confirmed precisely that date. Now, this microscopic study is actually but the latest in a whole string of studies that collectively do appear to authenticate the Shroud. For example, another study from a few years back confirmed that the blood stains on the Shroud were in fact human blood.
Okay. Now, this is something, this is the study that Dan references in the very opening skeptic video is from this 2017 study. But remember, there's an update. It says 2017, 2022, and 2024.
So you're saying this one is the one that's maybe not so sure?
According to Dan.
According to Dan.
Yeah, because what Dan's whole thing is the people who are doing these studies, they got skin in the game. They want it to be true.
Yeah.
Is that how you come to science? Yada, yada, yada. But it's like, just because someone's a Christian, it doesn't mean that their biblical scholarship is not true. Just because someone's a Christian doesn't mean that the Shroud is false because they have some vested interest. But let's see where this goes. Go ahead.
Fascinatingly, it was the blood of a torture victim. It was a study conducted by Italy's National Research Council and the University of Padua's Department of Industrial Engineering. That study concluded that the man wrapped in the Shroud of Turin suffered a strong, what they called polytrauma, or multiple traumatic injuries. The research was published in a peer-reviewed academic journal. It made quite the stir in the academy. And what's so interesting here is that the conclusions of this study corroborate earlier ones that did in fact conclude that the remnant stains in the shroud were in fact human blood. We have multiple studies that do confirm that. In fact, when I was in the academy, I had a student of mine who did her research thesis on the topic of the Shroud of Turin, and she pointed out in her research that previous studies determined that the blood on the shroud is in fact real. It's human male blood of the type AB. It's a rare blood type, present in only about 3% of the world's population.
Jesus had AB blood?
That's awesome.
Wow.
That's awesome.
These studies found a high concentration of the pigment
More like
bilirubin,
AD blood.
which is consistent of someone dying under great trauma or stress. And what this latest study found, this one from a few years back, was that the blood of the victim exemplifies a high degree not merely of trauma, but of multiple traumatic injuries, such as to the head, torso, wrists, legs, feet. The blood in this current study found nanoparticles of a very particular structure, size, and distribution.
That thing is kind of creepy. I'm not going to lie. I don't know how I feel about this.
Why did they do that?
Big,
super annoying
icon of Jesus. This makes me very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
My
Typical
man
for the
you can at least cover him up.
Found in patients who endured multiple violent traumas, such as in the case with
So the blood confirms that whoever this was on wasn't just it was blood, but it's likely blood of someone that endured pretty serious trauma.
So we're looking at around the year 2000, of which he was crucified. We're looking at something else that is super interesting that Michael Knowles brings up as far as the image is concerned.
Yeah, this is very interesting. Go ahead.
Skeptics don't know how to explain this shroud. What's odd about the shroud, though, is there is this faint image of a man on there, but it doesn't appear to be paint. There does appear to be maybe a little bit of blood, but it's not all blood. What's even stranger is the image that's on the shroud appears to be a photographic negative of the image of a man somewhere between 5'7" and 6 feet tall, a man who appears to have been tortured, a man who appears to have a crown of thorns on his head, a man who appears to have been crucified. But it's a photographic negative, as if it were produced by a spurt of light rather than paints or anything like that.
So I'm guessing the photographic negative, if I had to take a wild guess, is as Jesus is being resurrected, there is a light that explodes in the sense of his glorified state. Because remember, he's out in his glorified body. So if he's in his glorified body, that means perhaps that is the light that's splashing out as he's being resurrected.
Yep.
And that is what's that's what's creating this negative image in a shroud.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Which, if you think about the theory around the Big Bang, is that when they look at the light waves, observing the light waves, they're all leaving the Earth. So there's this idea that, like, when God created the Earth, and, like, let's say there was a Big Bang-esque thing coined by the Catholic priest. Don't get mad at me, right? Then there was a moment of light, and all of the light particles are now being expanded and outward. So it's almost like Jesus being resurrected with the light outward is now is doing the same thing that we see even is observable from a scientific standpoint from the creation of the Earth.
No one's known what this is. If it is, I mean, as it is, something akin to a photographic negative, no one can really understand how that would have appeared, even if it were a medieval forgery from the 14th century. Well, we didn't have photography back then.
Skeptics, even if it was a forgery, it sounds like, I don't know, but it sounds like there's no explanation for it.
Aliens at the
someone.
You're getting to aliens.
So you're getting into aliens. You're getting into pyramids. How are those built? You're getting into that sort of stuff.
Yep.
What is this thing?
I think this is a massive development. If this is true, this is huge. This is huge. Now, I think the skeptics are going to say, well, the people that are studying this, they got skin in the game. They want to, right? They want to prove it true. I would say, well, the people that are studying and trying to disprove it, do they have skin in the game? Are they also skeptic? Does it prove their presupposition? It's like the people that try to date when the New Testament was written. Well, it couldn't have been written before this year because of Jesus predicting his own death and predicting the destruction of the temple.
And there's no way he can predict the destruction of the temple. So then it was definitely written afterwards.
Right.
It's like, wait.
Yeah, that's not how we do science. So clearly, let's be fair. Both sides have presuppositions. Both sides either want it to be true or don't want it to be true. Both sides are coming at it from an angle. Now, again, if the evidence here suggests that it's true, this is pretty revolutionary in terms of a relic of this kind to the date and the light negative, creating that negative image, which can't be explained as far as I know.
Yeah.
Perhaps confirming at the very least that Jesus died and was crucified, and this is from him. And at the most, confirming the resurrection because the light beams out of him as he's being resurrected.
Yep.
That's a theory of mine. I don't know.
For me, this doesn't validate my belief, obviously, in Jesus. And it's not even, I would say, the strongest historical argument that I would even lean on from an apologetic standpoint. But it's a real fun one to add in there as the science gets better and the technology gets better, to be like, oh, and we have this thing that was wrapped possibly over Jesus. And so, like, I think there's a lot of other historical evidence that is so significant that you just can't deny it. Evidence that demands a verdict, right? But the shroud is almost
It's an actual physical piece of evidence.
it's a cherry on top.
So,
if
yeah.
it gets disproven, I'm not tripping.
Sure.
I was already coming from the standpoint of like, we don't really know. It might have been medieval times. This new thing makes it be like, oh, maybe we do know. Maybe it is more accurate.
Shroud has gathered renewed international attention this week due to recent research, which hints that it may be a genuine artifact. Scientists at Italy's Institute of
Crystallography.
of the National Research Council assessed a small sample of the shroud using a technique called wide-angle X-ray scattering. This method designed to look at the way cellulose within the flax fibers naturally ages. The cellulose is made of long chains of molecules which slowly break down into smaller sugar molecules as time passes. By shining an X-ray through the linen samples, the investigators revealed details of the linen cellulose patterns and predicted the material's age. According to the latest study, Shroud's material dates back to the time of Jesus' life. Wow. Alternative theories, which propose that the shroud is a medieval hoax, generally suggest that it was made in Western Europe. However, isotope analysis of fragments of cloth indicate that the flax actually originated from the Western Levant, an area comprised of Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and parts of Jordan and Syria. The study was commissioned by William Mecham, an independent American archaeologist and member of the board of the Shroud of Turin Education and Research Center. Mr. Mecham told the Catholic Herald, with a probable Near Eastern origin, new doubts must be raised about interpreting the shroud as simply a fake relic made in medieval Europe. And new questions arise about the image of the cloth that signifies the possibility that this cloth is actually the burial shroud of Jesus, strengthened by this new evidence.
I'm just trying to scroll to see if they have anything that is the opposite.
Okay, I'm curious, does anyone have an explanation of the negative image of how this thing is even, how is it even possible to get this negative image?
According to an international team of scientists and other interested folk called the Yahoo Shroud Science Group, the hypotheses about the genesis of the shroud involving the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth cannot be rejected. Among them, the group members write, a hypothesis correlated to an energy source coming from the enveloped or wrapped man, and others correlated to surface electrostatic discharges caused by an electric field. Since these hypotheses appear to invoke processes unknown to science, which presumably occur during a return from the dead, add that in there.
Wait, how do you know that? How do you know that?
Presumably, we could imagine that if you return from the dead, there's some sort of light that comes out.
Yeah.
Not improbable, but I would say more probable if you're coming from a Christian worldview and you're making the argument, and you're saying it's the resurrection of God. Then because I feel like, I don't know if like there was light coming from Lazarus, but you never know.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's what the commenter said. It is not explainable.
You cannot explain it. At the very least, you cannot explain the photographic. You could say it's a forgery. You could say it's from the medieval period because of this test or that test, but no one can explain the negative.
Yeah, even if it was from the medieval times, it seems like
Sounds like a W.
They wouldn't be able to figure out the photo negative.
I'll take it. Hit the link in the bio. Sign up for the free 7-day trial at Patreon. And I will see you guys tomorrow. All right? Love you guys. Peace. After the incredible success of our Bless God prayer journal, many of you guys began to ask for something that had a planner. And so we combined our Bless God prayer journal with a brand new leadership planner that jam-packs the same things from our prayer journal with a planner, goal setting, leadership meeting, and notes. With the next pages, you can see different sections right along here of this leadership planner where you can start out with actionable goals, 12 months of calendar, our original prayer journal prompts, our leadership journal with the proven problem solution framework, and of course, just free write notes. This leadership planner is based off of Matthew 25, 14 through 30, which of course is the parable of the talents. The vision of the planner is to help you make the most of your time, talent, and treasure. Head over to blessgod.shop and get yours today. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.
Ruslan.